Across the world, people have their housing costs taken away as much as half of their income. Have you ever thought of trying to change that? The good news is there is a way. House hacking is real, and we are here to show you how other people just like you have made it happen. Welcome to the House Hacking Podcast. And here is your host, house hacking expert, Andrew Kerr.
I just want to start off this episode by saying thank you. I have been absolutely blown away by the support and the number of folks that are listening. I mean, just this past week alone, I had almost 100 messages over Facebook, the contact form on our website, and Instagram for folks that are listening to the show. I cannot thank you enough for all that love and the support, and the additional questions you have is amazing. So if you have a specific house hacking question, or maybe you're thinking about a very unique scenario, shoot us a message on Facebook or Instagram, and we'll get back to you with an answer for that question. Now, today's episode, I just absolutely loved. As you've probably heard on a couple of the shows, my wife and I are big travelers. And what I really like about house hacking is it gives you this chance to eliminate your biggest cost that you can then use to fuel your other passions. And on today's episode, we're going to hear how Brooke took her job and changed to telecommuting and paired that with house hacking that really let her create this ideal lifestyle for her situation. And it's something we really haven't dived into, this idea of lifestyle design, but house hacking really gives you this huge platform. And I love how she paired this to sort of create her ideal lifestyle. So with that said, let's go ahead and bring her on. Brooke, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to hear about your house hacking journey. So how are you doing and where are you calling in from?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm doing well. I am calling in from Mexico City, where I've been for the past couple of weeks now.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you do a house hack in Mexico City, or are you just traveling? And or did you do the house hack in the US? Like how'd you end up in Mexico City?
No, I didn't do my house hack in Mexico. Maybe my next one, but my property is located in Providence, Rhode Island. And I use that as my home base. I work remotely, so I travel quite a bit, especially this past year. I've probably been gone about 6 months out of the year.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm a little bit jealous. That's really cool. Well, let's really get into your house hacking sort of story. I mean, can you just give us this high level sort of overview or summary what it is, and then we'll really start to dig into all the pieces of it?
Sure. I have been living in my first house hack since spring of 2018. I think I closed on the property in April 2018, and it's located in Providence, Rhode Island, as I mentioned. It is a 3-unit multifamily. So I live in one of the units, and I rent out the other 2 to tenants. And yeah, I use my apartment as my home base while I travel.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So you bought it back in the spring of 2018. I really just want to start to dig in. Like, did you know what house hacking was at the time? I mean, how'd you first hear about the idea? What made you want to buy a 3-unit, a triplex?
Yeah, so I had thought about house hacking before I knew there was a term for it. I knew I didn't want to pay rent ever again. And paying a mortgage only seemed like a small step up. So I thought, why not try buying a multi where I could live in one of the apartments and have tenants cover the monthly payments. And that's when I started doing my research, and I stumbled upon, of course, like the Bigger Pockets forum and other resources similar to that, where lots of people were using the house hacking strategy. So I thought, if they can do it, then why can't I? And that's when I got serious about looking at properties. And I had a friend in the city who was a realtor and a property manager. So it was kind of off running from there.
That's awesome. I mean, so was it really this desire of, I want to work remotely and I want to travel, is what made you think about house hacking and buying a multi-unit, or what sort of drove that idea of like, I don't want to pay a mortgage? Because I feel like the typical thing, at least here in the US, is, you know, you buy a house as soon as you have your first real job, or you get married, then you buy a house together and you buy that nice single family home with the dining room, the living room, the bonus room, way too many bedrooms. So like, what was this drive of actually wanting to do a house hack?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've always been very like personal finance savvy. And when I was in college, I was an RA, so my housing expenses were covered by the university. So paying rent was actually something that was new for me after I graduated. So my first year out of college, I rented a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate, and we were each paying about $550 per month in rent, not including heat and electric, on the east side of Providence. And yeah, after that year, I decided, I'm going to try to never pay rent again. So I kind of just challenged myself to eliminate that. Like most Americans, I think, spend like 30 to 35% of their income on housing.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to figure out how to not do that.
Yeah, so you went from no rent as an RA to paying rent. And you're like, oh, this just sucks. This isn't fun. So let me figure out how to not pay rent. All right, I like this. And when did you end up graduating from college? How long ago was that?
That was in 2015.
Okay, so sort of 2015, paid rent for a little bit, and then you bought in the spring of 2018. So luckily you had this friend that was a property manager and also a realtor. Did you go to her and say, I want to do a house hack? Did she know what the house hacking was? Or did you just say multifamily? Like, what was the criteria that you were actually looking for?
Yeah, sure. So I guess to go back a little bit, a few weeks before my lease was up, after that 1 year of renting and working in the city, I negotiated with my employer to work 100% remotely as a contractor. So I was doing the work I was already doing, but less hours per week at a higher hourly rate. And that allowed me to move back to Connecticut, where I'm from, and save money for a property by not paying rent for almost 2 years. So that's kind of like financially how I got there. And then I had a friend who ended up moving into a property and getting to know the property manager there. And that's how I became friends with my realtor. And he's really awesome. He had already owned a few properties himself and was very familiar with the house hacking, like owner occupied idea. So it was really a great fit.
I mean, would you give that as like a recommendation for someone that's looking to do a house hack, is go find a realtor that's also a real estate investor and sort of understands what you'd be looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if they're investing themselves, especially in the property type that you want to invest in, like for me, it was multifamilies. And he had owned duplexes and triplexes before. So it was really perfect. And I think too, or if you could find a realtor who's also a property manager, because they have so many contacts that you can then tap into.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really smart. All right. So then did you just tell the realtor, any sort of multifamily in Providence? I mean, like, was there a specific geographic area, or like what was the radius that you were looking at? And was it just duplexes and triplexes, or did you say quads, or what was that sort of overall criteria that you told her? And what was sort of the price range that you felt comfortable looking in?
Absolutely. So I knew that I wanted to live in more of an A-class neighborhood. I didn't want to have to be chasing tenants down for rent because I work full-time. So I knew I wasn't going to be full-time on property management. And I was going to be living there, right? And probably solo. So I wanted a place where I felt comfortable living. And luckily I had lived in Providence before, and that's where I wanted to buy. So I knew the neighborhoods very well. I had 2 neighborhoods picked out where I felt comfortable focusing on for my property search.
Okay, so you knew that. One thing you mentioned was sort of Class A. For folks that are listening, what do you mean by like Class A, and what would be a Class B and Class C?
Yeah, so you might be able to give a better definition than me, but from my perspective and like what I've read, Class A is more of like the higher class of properties. Like the neighborhood tends to be better. The people living there, the median income tends to be higher, and things like that. And also, I think they take into account the school district and things like that.
Overall, just better location, as well as newer properties versus the properties that might be 60, 70 years old and wearing down. And then B is sort of that middle tier. And then C is that sort of rougher neighborhood, need some improvement. Okay, so you said, all right, I want A-class area so you feel comfortable and safe. And from when you started looking to when you actually closed on the property, how long did that whole process take, and how long did you actually spend looking?
Yeah, so I feel like my story is maybe probably a little different from the ones that I've heard, but I think from start to finish, like from getting pre-qualified for a loan to closing, it was maybe 8 months, so fairly quick. I think the unique thing, though, is that I only looked at 3 or 4 properties with my realtor before I had a bid that got accepted. And the the story around that is, so I was actually traveling when my realtor sent me the property that I ended up purchasing. So all the credit for finding my property goes to my realtor. In fact, I was out of the country. I was in Guatemala when my realtor messaged me, about the property, and we put a bid in. It was my first bid ever on a property. I really didn't think it was going to get accepted. The owners countered the next day, and we came back with the same bid, and it got accepted.
Okay, that's awesome. So you had actually went under contract, never actually physically seen the property in person. You just saw the pictures online. Did your realtor go out and walk the property before you made the offer, or how did that sort of work?
Yeah, so I had a lot of trust in my realtor. He's also my good friend. So he also took photos. He did a video walkthrough for me of the units. And more importantly, I knew the neighborhood extremely well. It's a good neighborhood with quality tenants, which was important to me. And I can actually see my old bedroom from my current kitchen where I now own.
Oh, awesome. So, yeah, super familiar with the area then. All right.
Exactly.
So you found the property, you're in Central America, you make an offer on it, it gets accepted. All right. And now do you got to fly back to the U.S. for closing, or, how much further that process were you out of the country for?
Yeah. So I had maybe 60 days before we had a closing date in the future. So I didn't have to cut my trip short. From Guatemala, I went to Belize for a week and then Mexico for 2 weeks. So I kind of lucked out. Like, I was able to finish my trip, and I came back, I want to say like the weekend before the final walkthrough. So luckily I was, of course, able to do the final walkthrough and all of that. So the timing really, really worked out. I think my closing date got pushed by maybe a week. So it afforded me some more time.
But look at you. You're like, nah, I'm not going to go back. I'm just going to do everything remotely. I'm going to go visit a couple other countries and close on the first property. No big deal. I got this. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what were like your friends and family like thinking at this point? Did you let them know you're closing on a property while you're traveling around the world? Or like, I mean,
I think I was still kind of skeptical myself that it would end up going through. So I didn't really tell anyone except for my coworker who I was traveling with. So yeah, I kind of held off until pretty much the day before signing the final paperwork.
You're like, surprise, I'm back in the country and I'm buying a property tomorrow. Awesome. Okay. So you bought the triplex. What was the purchase price ended up being on it, and what type of loan did you use?
Sure. So the purchase price was $365,000. And the loan that I used, I ended up using a conventional loan. So in Rhode Island, at least in the time where I bought my property, if you're owner occupied, purchasing a multifamily, I was able to put down 3.5% on a conventional loan.
Oh, okay. So not FHA, like actual conventional loan.
Exactly. So I didn't have PMI.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. So then what did your actual mortgage payment come to?
Yes. So the total loan amount was $346,750 after doing the down payment. And then my monthly mortgage was $2,737.
Okay. Was that with your taxes and insurance, or was that separate?
That's everything together.
Okay. So, I mean, most folks would say like, oh, $2,700 for a mortgage payment, that seems really high, especially for a first home. What made you feel so comfortable buying a property at this value and being able to carry a payment that big, especially with, this being your first property?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it was two main factors. So I had a very stable job where I still work there. Been there for about 3.5 years. And it's 100% remote. So I knew that if something went wrong, if I needed to put in some sweat equity to fix anything, I could do that. And also the rents at the time of purchase were $2,550. So I was paying, about $250 a month that wasn't covered by rents.
Oh, so that makes it pretty easy then if you've got that much rent coming in. So were all 3 units of the triplex occupied at the time, or was there one that was empty? Like what was that makeup when you bought it?
Yeah, so there was one unit that was unoccupied, and the other two were rented out to tenants who I inherited.
Awesome. So then what was the makeup of each of the units? Were they like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom? Were they all exactly the same? What was the floor plan like?
Yep. So they're all very similar. The 3 units, each of them have 2 bedrooms.
And are they just one bathroom each?
Exactly. Yes.
And then, so one was empty, the other 2 units, what were you getting for rent? And was that sort of below market rent at the time, or were they actually paying market rent?
Yes. So when I purchased, the recent purchase, so the first floor was paying $13.50 a month, which pretty much market value, could probably go a bit higher, but they'd been there for 2 years. So I knew that they were fairly reliable tenants. And then the third floor was paying $1,200. So total $2,550.
And then did they have existing leases in place that you kept, or did you have them sign new leases?
They did. So both floors were on 1-year leases. And I actually had a surprise at closing where I found out that the first floor had signed a 2-year lease. So, and they still had maybe a year and a half to go on that wow. 2-year lease, which I don't think is very common, but I actually didn't know that until closing.
And then, so then did you have to ask that person to vacate on that first floor, or was it you were on the sort of basement apartment level, and then it was the first floor and second floor that were rented?
Yeah. So the first floor and the third floor were rented out.
Okay.
And then the second floor was vacant. And I actually ended up remodeling the second floor.
Okay. And then did the other 2 units need to be remodeled when the tenants moved out, or were they sort of pretty good for a rental unit?
Yeah. So the third floor, they just moved out this year. So May 2019. And I did like mostly cosmetic updates, painted the whole unit, new flooring, pretty simple things. So nothing major, but they did require some updating.
And now is the new tenant in at higher rent than the $1,200 that the previous one was paying?
Yes. So now those tenants are paying $1,300 per month. So I increased it by $100 a month.
Okay, so now you're bringing in what, like $2,650 a month, and your mortgage is just a hair over $2,700 a month. So you're almost, breaking even on owning a property.
Yes, and I actually just refinanced in August. So my new monthly mortgage payment with insurance and everything is now at $2,574.
Oh wow! And so yeah, you're actually now more than breaking even. You got a little bit of a buffer in there as well. So why'd you end up deciding to refinance? Did rates just drop from when you originally bought the property?
Yes, absolutely. When I bought the property, the rates were actually pretty high. I want to say around almost 6%. So I just refinanced to 3.1%.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So yeah, that's a big jump, and that gets you that savings there. All right. So now your 2-bedroom that you're living in, are you renting out a room in there, or